Derry's not like any town I've ever been in before. People die or disappear 6 times the national average. And that's just grown-ups. Kids are worse. Way worse.
With almost the entire town gathered together on Easter Sunday, tragedy struck Derry. The event was an Easter egg hunt held at the Ironworks building with 500 eggs hidden and waiting to be found by the 500 or more children present at the event. The parents of these children were also there, so the building was packed. But the owners who had put on this charitable event had taken care to ensure that everything was safe. They closed off and posted guards at all the dangerous areas of the premises. They also shut down all the boilers, completely. Yet despite all these precautions, the event, which was supposed to end at 4 p.m., found an early ending at 3:15 when the entire building exploded. The blast and wreckage killed 102 persons total, 88 of whom were children. No one has been able to find an explanation for that disaster, since there was nothing functioning on that day that could have led to an explosion of that magnitude. Nine-year-old Robert Dohe, whose body was blown to bits in the blast, was so mangled that his head was found a great distance from the scene. It ended up in an apple tree in a woman's backyard. She didn't find it until the Wednesday after the Easter Sunday event. He still had chocolate on his teeth. The dried up blood in his hair was now roughly the same color as the chocolate. Ghost Town, 1741.
What's that?
That's the charter for Derry Township.
Derry was originally settled by around 300 persons. The charter they possessed named them the Derry Company, and it granted them a large portion of land covering Derry's current borders and quite a bit of its surrounding lands. But then, in 1741, some years after the initial settlement, the entire village of settlers, numbering 340 persons by then, disappeared into thin air. The disappearance must have occurred sometime between June and October of 1741, because records show that the settlers were present in June, but that they were all gone by October. But there's no record of what happened to cause all of them to disappear. The only indication that anything tragic might even have taken place that year was the existence of a single house that was completely gutted by fire. The location of that house is where the streets Ripsom and Jackson intersect in the present-day story. But those streets probably did not exist at the time, roughly 250 years prior to the current events of the story. No one even talks about the disappearance, but no explanation that could be given would find any facts to support it.
There are rumors of Indians, but no sign of an attack.
It wasn't likely that they were all wiped out by a Native American attack, because at least there might have been bodies and bones left in its wake. But there was none of that. Neither could it have been a massive flood. The rains were not plentiful that year. Disease was also unlikely, as there was no evidence of disease in any other nearby town. And the way the matter is treated in Derry, it's almost as if no one even knows it happened.
We made an oath.
Swear? If it isn't dead, if it ever comes back, we'll come back to.
Where's my shoe?
The year Georgie Denbrough died, he was the first of several children murdered between the fall of 1957 and summer of 1958. One of the children who died was a girl named Betty Ripsom. Her father was a gas station owner and her mother a housewife. During the 3 weeks before Betty died, her mother would hear voices coming from the kitchen sink. They terrified her, but she found the grit to speak back to them once.
Hello? Who are you?
She hollered down the drain, asking who they were. The response they gave was the reply of the possessed. The voices said their name was Legion, giving the same answer given to Jesus by the man possessed by demons. After Betty went missing, Mrs. Ripson wouldn't even go near that kitchen sink for any reason for the next 2 years. Betty was never found. Mr. Ripson soon found a reason to believe his wife's fear of the kitchen sink and those pipes wasn't mere paranoia. He was washing the dishes one night, as he always had to since his wife couldn't use the sink anymore. When he began to let the water out of the sink, inside the gurgling, soapy sound, he heard his daughter's voice coming through to him. She sounded as though she were laughing, at first. But when he really listened, the laughter began to sound more like screams, or a mixture of screaming and laughing.
Hello?
Kid! Kid!
Picture album. Bill Denbrough often went into Georgie's room, but it always had a haunted feel to him. Not exactly because he thought a ghost might be there, but because Georgie's presence filled the place so completely. His family never really changed anything in there since Georgie died. On this occasion, he came in to try to find a way to make the place less horrifying, to deal with Georgie's death and to heal in a way that he knew his parents were failing to do. Georgie had been fascinated with photos and had kept an album of photographs that he had coerced his relatives and friends to help him fill. There were photographs in that album from years and even decades before Georgie himself was born. Pictures he had been given by persons who had lived through those times. Bill had had a bad encounter with the photo album the December after Georgie had died. He now dared to open it again and to flip through the pages. He saw a picture of his mother when she was young, his uncle and aunt, an old car, church house, Georgie as a baby, even a picture of himself at 3 years old when he was in the hospital after a car accident. Finally, on the last page, a picture of Georgie, the last one he ever took, snapped 10 days before his death. Georgie's front toothless 6-year-old smile rang out from the picture, but it soon transformed into a sinister leer. And as his right eye performed a creepy wink, the voice from the photograph indicated that Bill would soon see Georgie. When Bill responds by hurling the album across the floor, even though it fell to a different page, the pages turned by themselves back to that picture. Blood came out of the picture too, and stained the floor while Bill ran from the room. Eddie Corcoran and his brother Dorsey were unfortunate in the stepfather they had. Months before, Dorsey had been beaten to death with a hammer by their stepfather. Since then, Eddie has been the sole recipient of the frequent beatings. Recently, he was thrown against a door from which protruded iron hooks for hanging jackets. He peed blood for days but was never taken to the hospital. So, on the last day of school when his report card was bad, he avoided going home. He went to the canal to wander around and thought perhaps he might even sleep there. While sitting atop the canal, feet dangling, he felt a soft but strong hand grip his foot. He looked down, and it was his dead brother Dorsey that looked back up at him. The sight caused him to pee himself. His brother was wearing the clothes he had died in, and his head was bashed in just as it had been in the incident that killed him. He called Eddie's name with that young voice, saying he came to see him and urging him to come down. Down, unfortunately, was a death drop into the roaring river. Eddie instinctively realized that this could not be his brother and tried to escape. The thing that comes after him is a nightmarish creature from a movie called The Creature from the Black Lagoon. His attempt at escape was valiant but vain. The creature, with its foul stench and razor-sharp fangs, overtook him, grasped his neck, and bit his head completely off his shoulders. Then the creature transformed into another shape. We're not told what the shape was, but perhaps it was the shape of a clown?